Hello and welcome. In this recording, we have a make and take. So we have our April make and take session, which is over Pear Deck and a little fun Pear Deck party, Pear Deck Palooza. So if you would like to have access to these slides, the short link you can type into your browser is on the screen, and it's also linked in the description for this video in the document for PGPs. So our game plan today is to learn a little bit about Pear Deck and how it supports universal design for learning and active engagement and participation in your classroom. If you are someone who's very familiar with Pear Deck, I hope you also can get some takeaways from this. There's some new features we can show you, but if you're someone who is new to Pear Deck, this is a really great intro to get started. So Pear Deck is a premium tool we have throughout BCSE. All students and staff have access to this, and it is an interactive presentation slideshow tool. So it works really well with Google Slides and allows you to add interactive questions, prompts, check-ins to your slide deck so that you can kind of gauge the room and see how students are understanding or if they have questions when you're presenting a topic. It's also really great for just formative assessments and just gathering some data to guide your instruction moving forward. On this particular session, what we're going to be doing is looking at some ways that you can use Pear Deck to have fun little check-ins with your students at the end of the year or even at the start of the school year or really any point in time that you'd like to have them to kind of get to know your students and build relationships along the way. So our goal for today is to learn how to use Pear Deck and to build your own custom slide. So with a make and take session, the idea is that you make something and you contribute it to our shared slide deck that you will all have editing access to. And you also take ideas too. So because we're all contributing to the same shared slide deck, there's going to be a bunch of different ideas on there, and you can take another idea that maybe you didn't contribute and implement that into your classroom as well. So I'm going to go over a few tips and tricks here with Pear Deck before we get started, and then I will show you some examples from this make and take as well as make my own example to show you. All right, so helpful things to know first. Make sure you have the Pear Deck extension installed already. So Pear Deck is something that works within Google Slides. It should be set out to your device already, but if you don't have it, you can click here and it will install for you. I also have two guides that I've linked here that just really go through a beginner crash course on Pear Deck. One of these, this first one here, has a printable guide to it. So if you'd like to have hard copies of instructions, you can have that there. And if you want to also practice and experience this as a student, I feel like it's a really helpful way to kind of learn the ins and outs of Pear Deck is to experience it yourself. And it also makes you more prepared for the first time you use it with your students too, because you've kind of been in their shoes before. I have an example linked here where you are in a student role and you're interacting with the questions that I have made on a Pear Deck session. All right. So why should I use Pear Deck in the first place? Before we get into too many tutorials and tips, some ideas for using Pear Deck in the classroom. It adds that level of engagement in a slideshow. So instead of it just being a passive learning experience for your students, they're answering questions, they're interacting with you, and you're getting the ability to kind of get some real-time feedback and information from them in a very less intrusive way. Some students might be intimidated by having to raise their hand each time to ask a question. So Pear Deck kind of gives them a safe space to ask a question or to answer without feeling the pressure of, speaking in front of the whole room if that's a better option for them. It's also great for just giving students options as well. And it's really helpful for getting data really quickly. So there's a lot of different question types in Pear Deck. There's multiple choice, there's drawing, there's text response, there's enter a number. There's even just like a free response option as well. So you have a lot of choice and flexibility within this one tool. And you can even turn it on to where student names are associated with their response so you can see who put what answers, or you can leave it totally anonymous. And I really do recommend that before you dive into a lot of this session that you tinker around and kind of go through some of the guided materials on the previous slide first, just so you don't feel like you're overwhelmed trying to go over some of these things. Pear Deck is not complicated, but there are a lot of features, so it helps if you kind of experience it as a student first and kind of practice with some of those feature sets before you start building. All right, so as always in a make and take session, we have a shared slide deck here where you will contribute your own example of a Pear Deck slide that you plan to use with your students in the classroom. So the idea in this session was it was fun little prompts and games and questions, really like no stakes, low stakes type of prompts here. And that's what you're going to be including on your slides. The idea is you make a slide and then you take a couple slides from others who have contributed to this session. So before I go to this slide deck link, I'm just going to show you a few examples to kind of get the creative juices flowing and for some inspiration. So here's an example of a kind of question that you can use with Pear Deck. So this is a rating scale. Some of you might use this maybe on an exit ticket if you've ever used those before, or magnets on your whiteboard in your classroom. I used to have one of those. This is another way of doing that. And what's great is that you get student responses on this, and it's just a little bit easier to collect that information versus physical paper copies or tabulating Google form afterwards. So what this is just a drag and drop interactive question. So whenever you see the Pear Deck toolbar across the bottom, then you know it's a live Pear Deck. It's a Pear Deck question. It's an interactive question type. To make this truly interactive, I do have to launch Pear Deck, and that brings up a separate type of this presentation and makes all the fun pieces work to where it actually is a drag and drop. But here's an example of what that is. So if you really like this one, you can copy it into your own Google slideshow. It's just a plain Google Slides presentation where I added that little Pear Deck question and I put my own little Bitmoji on here. What you could do is delete me off of your example here and add yourself in instead if you have a Bitmoji. So some other examples here are just some fun this or that prompts. Again, this is a drawing or drag and drop type of prompt on Pear Deck where the student would circle which ones they like and kind of helps you get to know them a little bit better. Another example here is just some of the fun little applications and streaming things that your students use. So which one would they pick if they could only use one for a week? All right, so I'm just going to show you now, we're going to go back to this link here where we have the shared presentation. But before I do that, I want to show you a little bit more about Pear Deck. Now, this is, again, not a full crash course on all things Pear Deck. It's very much an intro, but I wanted to make sure that I showed you some of this before we dig in and start building our own pieces. So if you look right now, this is one of those slides that I said is a Pear Deck slide. We know it's a Pear Deck slide because it has this little Perry guy here and says Pear Deck interactive slide. And if I click this, I can technically move it around, but it tells me not to change this link. Whatever you do, if you want to make it a Pear Deck session, do not delete this gray bar because then you've just lost all of the wonderful coding and things that makes it interactive. So always keep that there. And if you copy any one of my slides, it's already there for you. But if you're starting from scratch on a Pear Deck slide, what I can do is I can just build my slide like usual. Maybe it's just a very basic check-in today, and I want to keep it like this. So if I wanted to make this slide a Pear Deck slide where students are answering this prompt that I've typed out, I have Pear Deck installed. It's a little button here across the top. You can also get to it from add-ons and Pear Deck for Google Slides add-ons. So there's a couple ways you can get to it, but I'm going to add that. The first time you use this, it will likely ask for your permission to access your Google Slides presentation. You will want to click allow. You'll also want to sign in with your BCSU Google account so you can have all of the premium features that we have as a district. So once I am here, I can kind of explore this little Pear Deck toolbar. There are lots of templates here. So if you want to really get started with Pear Deck, I would start using some of their pre-made templates. What I did right here is made my own slide, so I'm not using a prompt or a template library question type. I made my own. So to make this interactive though, I need to decide what type of question this is. So here are the different interactive question types that Pear Deck supports. So you can add text, a text-based question. There's a multiple choice. There's enter a number. There's a website, which basically means that you enter a website and students go to that website. So it's not so much them inputting an answer, it's you directing them to another resource. There's a draw question type and a draggable. So the one where it had the rating scale with my Bitmoji, that was a draggable. The one here where they're circling which resources or things they like the most, that is a drawing. I will personally say I love the drawing one the most because it supports drawing as well as text. So you have a lot of flexibility and options on that one. And Pear Deck is also mobile device friendly. So if you're ever having a student who maybe forgot to charge their device or just forgot it, they can technically join on their cell phone and it works just fine. All right, so to make this interactive, we're going to do a text-based answer here. All right, so I just click text. It's telling me it's adding this interactive question to my slide. And there we go. Now I have this as a Pear Deck slide. So we're all set there. Now it's Pear Deck. Now, if you're thinking, okay, we made this slide, but you said a few minutes ago that we have to launch this for it to actually be interactive. Because if we're just looking at this right now and I go into present mode, you can't do anything with this yet. So to make it a Pear Deck session, you have to come over here again. You can open this Pear Deck toolbar from the Pear Deck button here or from add-ons, Pear Deck for Google Slides add-on. And I'm going to do Start Lesson. And then I decide what type of lesson it is. So this is student pace mode, which means that it's really good for asynchronous. This is great if you don't really have a particular time frame you want students to do this on. You can give them a couple of days. Maybe it's something they do at the end of the week. If you're using this as like a note-taking type of tool, that's a really good option. If you want to do a live session where you're getting the feedback and you're controlling the pace at which they go through those questions, then do instructor pace. The students can't move ahead of you. They can't basically go any different than the pace that you've established. So if I wanted to do that, I'll do instructor pace activity. And then it just tells me, oh, I forgot to log in. So I need to do this because it's been a little minute since I've logged in. If it happens to you like it just did to me, you just need to sign in and then it goes. All right. And basically what it's doing is it's making my Pear Deck session active. So it's going to give me a link, and I have a couple of ways I can get students into this session. So this is what students need to make it a truly interactive presentation. I can give them a link right here, or I can tell them to go to joinpd.com and they just enter this code. So that is how you can have them join. If you exit off of the screen, you always have that student who's a little bit behind in entering that code. It stays up here in the top corner. You can always click that to display it in front of the whole screen again. So I can share this on my LMS course, or I can just have them go to this link, joinpd.com, and enter this code, and that's what makes it interactive. So now whenever students get to a Pear Deck, whenever I'm on a Pear Deck slide here where I've made it an interactive question type, they have the ability to interact with these prompts now. And if I had students responding, I had the ability to click Show Responses, and it would show them. If I lock the screens, then they can't advance further. I've set the pace here. So they can't move ahead of what I'm doing. Their screen is frozen. So that gives me a chance to kind of build in a break and explain any questions they might have or any misconceptions we might have and clarify. Whenever I'm finished, I'm going to click End. I'm going to name this after my class period or whatever day of the week it is. So I have this all organized. And whenever you end a Pear Deck session, on peardeck.com, you'll want to sign in with your BCSU Google account, and you can see all of your responses and your data there. So don't think that whenever you exit out of the screen and you end this, there's no way to go back and look at your data and you have to have it memorized. No, if you go to peardeck.com, you can see all of your results, all of your information there, and you can even generate a Google Doc and share it with students automatically. You don't have to share it individually. Pear Deck will do that for you. You can share it with them and it has their responses. So it's a really good follow-up activity for them to see their work and to take additional notes if they need to. So I'm just going to say this was our make and take April. If I type it right. All right. So I'll save and end that session. And this is where I can generate takeaways, which generates a Google Doc for students that has all of my slides, all of the responses that they inputted, and gives them space on a little table cell to add additional notes if they would like. All right, so we are all finished there, and that is how you do a Pear Deck session. So now that we've done that, let's look at some inspiration here, and you can start building your own slides. So really the key is make your slide and however many colors and fun pictures and things you want to add your prompt and your question. And the last piece you can add is the Pear Deck type of question. When I say Pear Deck type of question, it's what type of interactivity you want, whether it's text, multiple choice, drawing, draggable, or you're having them enter a number or go to a website, you have that opportunity here. I definitely feel like the website is probably the least utilized one just because the whole premise of Pear Deck is really more interaction. That's not quite as interactive, but there probably are some use cases that you can have for that. Maybe it's you're building your whole lesson inside of one Pear Deck session. You need them to go out to another website. You have that flexibility. All right. So here are some more examples of ones that we came up with. So on this one, you have students pick whatever house they would like to be in. And I will say I did not come up with every single one of these myself. I pulled these from actually some Instagram and TikTok videos where these were fun little questions people were asking each other. But, I felt like some of our students gravitate to those types of media. So why not put those on a lesson? So on this one, you can make it more this or that, more specific to your content area. I was social studies, so that's why I have that one. You can make it relevant to the different seasons. So we have winter, we have spring, zones of regulation, which is really helpful for checking in with students, really supports the self-regulation and executive functioning areas of universal design for learning. And again, this is a draggable. Whenever you make a draggable question type, you can decide the color and the type of icon that they're dragging, as well as the size. You can add multiple draggables. So if I wanted them to drag a couple of different icons on here, you can. It's a really helpful one if maybe you're building a question type where students are dragging to parts of something, like parts of a cell or the location of a country or a city on a map. You can definitely do that. All right, so, oh yeah, here's an example of that. So, all right, we have a couple of different ones here. So their favorites, and they drag and drop them there. All right. Other ones on a scale of cat, how are you feeling today? So they drag the cat. All right, we have that one. Right, and then we have some of our blank slides here. So this is where you can start adding your own example of a Pear Deck slide. All right, so what I'm going to do is add a Pear Deck slide here. So these are all just totally blank slides. You can do whatever you want. So what I'm going to do is make one that's a little funny. And I think what I'm going to do, I saw examples of this. Someone talked about this on a conference, and this is not what I thought was going to come up. Here it is. All right, so this is kind of a scale of cake, and these are all kind of goofy. So these are supposed to be porcupine or hedgehog cakes, and let's just say they didn't turn out so great. So I'm just going to save this picture on my device. I could also copy it. And what I'm going to do is come back over here to Pear Deck, drag and drop, put it on my slide. Hopefully this doesn't get too pixelated. Ooh, it kind of is. So I can put that there, and I'm going to delete that text because it's hard to see. I can put that on my slide, and I'm actually going to copy this, save myself some time. Stamp the cake. Describe how you are feeling. All right. And I can change my background if I want. We're just using basic Google Slide skills right here. This is nothing particularly fancy. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move these up a little bit. We're going to add our Pear Deck prompt in. So I'm going to click Add-ons, Pear Deck for Google Slides, open Pear Deck add-on. It's working, which is great. Awesome, awesome. And then I'm going to select my question type over here. I'm going to do draggable. It's going to work its magic. And here's where I configure my settings. So if I want to change the icon type, I can. I have a couple of different ones that I can pick from. And let's do a star. And then I can also change the color. So if I want this to stand out, I can. We're going to do purple, and I'm going to make it bigger, and we'll just do update slide. And if I wanted to add more draggables, I would just click add another, and I can do that. I think you could have up to 10 technically on there. All right, so there we go. That's an example of one that we can add really quickly. So that is how you can make your Pear Deck slides. Pretty straightforward. So what you would need to do is just kind of go through this process and add your own slides here. We have a few examples that people have added. We have the cats, we have some of the other ones. So you have some examples to go off of, and you can add your own. You can make it more specific to your content area and your grade level, or you can make it pretty broad, just kind of use it as a general check-in prompt with your students if you would like. If you have any questions, please let us know. The last slide on that last deck I was on has the professional growth point form. So just fill that out so you can get your PGPs for participating today. And definitely keep adding to the slide deck. I'm excited to see what Pear Deck prompts you come up with. Thank you.